Okay, welcome everyone. As Lada mentioned, my name is Jan Goodey. I work at Kingston University where I'm the course director for MA magazines, and I also teach a data journalism module to undergraduates. The talk I'm going to be giving relates to the climate crisis and how we deal with it with our students in the field of journalism. The crux of the matter is that environmental journalism in the climate crisis is a changed discipline, more informative than entertaining, more driven than contemplative. And in this respect, our journalism students imbibe and give out more pointed messages, and there are none more pointed than this one.
Holds of modern humans, of us. We are a very recent arrival on Earth, maybe 200,000 to 300,000 years ago. It's a flick of an eye and
This is Noam Chomsky, who's talking last month to a group of students, because I don't think we can get the visuals.
evolutionary time. We don't have a lot of time to find the answer. Not find, more precisely, to determine the answer. And we're going to do that one way or another. That's unavoidable. We will determine the answer one way or another. More accurately, you will determine the answer. Like it or not, fate has placed you in a position where you will determine whether we march on to disaster or whether the human species and much other life on Earth can be saved from a terrible, indescribable fate. The means are available.
Okay, so that was Professor Chomsky.
They are known.
Talking to a group of students last month. I've been a journalist for 42 years, so since school, worked on local papers, worked up to Fleet Street, local papers, magazines. I was in further education for 10 years, and I've been in higher education for the past 8. I'm also an environmental activist. This is one of the stories I did in the 90s. So for my sins, I was a road protester in the 90s, climbing up trees, so on and so forth. And in those days, we had the Roads to Prosperity, which was John Major's initiative, which we coined the Roads to Nowhere, which is opposite 30 years later, because so much of what governments could have done then remains undone now. This paper will seek to illustrate how we best teach climate journalism to under and postgraduate students. It will focus on, number one, how this work relates to journalism education in general, and number two, how other journalism educators could utilise practices outlined here in their own work. I'll be using case study material as well as general guidance from an MA magazine journalism course and a BA data journalism module that I teach. The MA is slightly more entertainment-led, the BA more news-led. There's going to be 4 sections where I'll be looking at resources, lesson plans, evaluation of process outcomes, and a final conclusion. Journalists base actions on target audiences, and their agency makes them arbiters of change. The recent Carol Cadwalladr case, the libel victory, exercises the great tenet of journalism, uncovering corruption in the public interest. Her journalism follows in a long line stretching back to John Lilburn, Elizabeth Johnson, and Gerard Winstanley. These pamphleteers, writers felt morally obliged to stand up for ordinary working people. Just as journalism educators of today have an obligation to teach students how to effectively impart warnings about the climate crisis based upon incontrovertible scientific data. Trivia in journalism is a non-essential industry, a diversion in these times where diversions encompass an increasingly narrower space. When Bangladesh is inundated, Pakistan is hitting 50 degrees, and Midwest America has a 4-year drought, not to mention Australia and Southern Europe on fire, the role of journalists is to stick to the facts. The focus on political personalities and wrongdoing is immaterial to the facts, which point to systemic lying and failure on climate on a grand scale. The journalism lecturer thus has ethical agency here. Section 1, I'll be looking at resources. The theoretical basis for this work is drawn from educationalists who have specialised in evidence-based techniques, such as Jeff Petty, who has written comprehensively on this subject and underpins the framework with inclusivity. Evolutionary theory points to how humans have not taxed the brain, not utilised it to its full potential, and this is where the challenge comes in. Journalism educators who instill challenge into their teaching strategy create student interactivity, especially by encouraging weaker students who will work harder to understand complex climate reporting issues. Young people aged 16 to 25 are prone to climate anxiety. Hence, a sensitive approach is imperative in the pedagogical framework when planning sessions. I've encountered students who've had panic attacks in lessons. 1 or 2 more extreme cases. And in situations such as these, it is necessary to adopt a solutions-based approach to the teaching. For example, when showing undergraduate and postgraduate data journalism students the NASA climate map, you might double click on it, should. Should just play. Yeah. This can have a visceral effect on students, and as with all extremes of climate change, birds falling out of the skies in India, dead cattle and giraffes in the Horn of Africa, care is required with the framing so that all students understand the ensuing contextual analysis. The big picture here is to invite students who appear to have only basic understanding to work harder by asking them questions. Diagnostic questioning is important here, as well as multiple choice, where the process is gradual and measured, both literally and figuratively. Always experimenting, in other words, and refusing to sit comfortably on the plateau is the position to adopt as an educator in this setting. The learner is out of their comfort zone, so you have to chivvy them through this process. A revised version of Doug Lemoff's No Opt-Out is instructive here. So when teaching how to interpret global temperature rises, here is a dialogue I'll have which illustrates the strategy being used. So basically, I will have already explained the global average temperature rise is currently 1.2 degrees above pre-industrial levels, and that 1.5 degrees is already locked in and demonstrated by irrefutable scientific evidence. Now I'll get the class to understand how within 15 to 20 years, 1.5 to 2 degrees is actually 7 degrees, and you use guidance and a whiteboard to explain that. Here's how the process unfolds. So I'll have an example student. So I'll speak to her first. So what's the first thing we do with this one, Aisha? Aisha, don't know. Me. Amrit? Amrit. We need to look at the Earth and see the average temperature of 1.52 degrees is for all the Earth. We live in land where temperatures are much higher, and in 25 years it could be 7 degrees. Me. Very good, but please tell us why. Amrit. Because the Earth is 70% water and 30% land, so temperatures in land will be higher. Me. Right. In which case, what's the first thing we need to do, Aisha? Aisha. Realise the Earth is 70% water. Me. Exactly. Good. And why? Aisha. So we realise land temperature could be 7 degrees higher. Okay? So this is a process which is proven to work. Because you always go back every time to any student who doesn't succeed with a question. The thing is, students begin to anticipate this return and get their answer prepared. It's a way of generating careful listening to their peers to engender the right answer and have the correct justification of why that is the case, knowing that they'll have to explain this themselves in short order. The more of these why questions we can ask with climate comprehension exercises is essential, as without them, students tune out and forget. In terms of section 2, which is lesson plans, much of my data journalism is taught to a mixed undergraduate and postgraduate cohort. It's all in workshop format. This is both practical and enabling to all. There is also the opportunity for support roles. So during the semester, I will bring in professionals from The Guardian. So I bring in a data team analyst, and I bring in a data team visualization expert. And basically, their two-hour specialist tuition workshops deal with climate data using Excel, using Google Sheets, and how to utilize visualizations within climate investigations. The results from these workshops, and workshops plus support, comes in the form of bridging possibilities. These are manifold, as exhibited in these two examples of workshops on data visualization, both unsupported. The first entitled, Consider how advanced data viz can be used in a worthwhile manner and why. Where do they fit in the pattern of an investigative feature on climate change? So I advise them to spend around an hour looking at 3 sites, and I give things like the British Antarctic Survey, the NASA Sea Level Calculator, and Greenpeace Ocean Surveys. I then ask them to analyse who's the target audience on your own. Do this individually, okay? They analyse the success they have in reaching the audience on their own. I then ask them to bullet point 3 examples of this with a partner, okay? And then get them to peer review each other's answers, okay? They evaluate the pros and cons of the 3 sites, and then my evaluation of process and outcomes follows for 15 minutes. Then come the killer questions, which are, how did you do that? Which focuses on the process. Second, what can you take away from this for your plan for an investigative feature in terms of viz and delivery of the presentation in particular? Okay. The second example is a more advanced version of example 1, with additional snowballing. So I get the students to take a detailed look at Financial Times and New York Times data sites and analyse 4 viz which interest them, viz being visualisations. They partner up, peer review each other's work, and then I get them to move into groups of 4. The reason for that is they then get to present what their partner did to the group of 4, so it just builds it another step. Then follows my evaluation again of process and outcomes. So this is then done looking at animated visualizations as well, and we look at examples from the Guardian data team, the NASA Earth warming site, and the UN environment site. And we analyse for salient points dealing with the recent history of climate change with a partner. They then again move into groups of 4, using 3 sources from the previous work in this exercise. I asked them to produce a simple cheat sheet guide to the current statistical situation on the climate emergency, and they produce that within the class setting. They have action help, so I give them an animated visualization to use for their purposes. It's a simple gimmick on YouTube. And I also give them a handout from the Financial Times on data visualizations and different data visualizations to use for different areas of data journalism. Moving on to section 3. The evaluation of processes and outcomes. Well, when planning lessons such as these that I've mentioned, the climate science, it's important to remember that the learning aims of getting a digestible take on statistics suitable for a target audience must match up to the activities you're giving them. Okay? It's all too easy to focus on the science and end up with 2 abstruse results. So this is all about simplification, which is where the second arm of my teaching comes in with MA Magazine journalism students, which is best looked at through the prism of evaluating the process and outcomes as it takes a more general approach. Over the last 7 years, MA Magazine students at Kingston have produced magazines on thrift, diversity, woke issues, but not specifically about climate environment as a theme. In that time, there was one climate crisis front cover, which statistically is significant when you compare that to national consumer magazines, where celebrity will still take pride of place on front covers 9 times out of 10. Rather than taking a whole class approach, as with the data journalism module, what I do with magazine students is a process of zoning and differentiation techniques. With these students, you start off with a less standardized knowledge base. Data journalism students have that across-the-board knowledge of dealing with the climate crisis through analysis of spreadsheet data, international reports, journals, and through skills with data visualization suites. The knowledge base of how to write magazine features or multimedia packages, videos, podcasts, on the climate crisis is less standardized with these students in a production module. What zoning and differentiation does is allow the workshop session to go ahead at a pace that suits particular student groupings. An example would be that when a 2-hour magazine workshop is in process and it's themed around, let's say, news input about climate change, the majority of the session will be taken up with students working on either the magazine website or print magazine in teams of designers, subs, writers, or editors. Okay, so they're zoned into those areas. Having opened the session with some examples of climate news stories in national publications, I'll monitor the teams by sitting on each group for 15 minutes and adopting a correcting practice surgery. Okay? This, along with 2-way feedback, where they will get to question and accept my improvements just as I will get to accept and look at their improvements, means that you have an almost kind of peer review process, okay? And it takes the features forward in terms of copy editing, design, or sub-editing, okay? These practice-based sessions are essential to the magazine production process. It can take 5 sessions to get 50% attainment of relevant production skills in a group like this, okay? So finally, just to sum up, I believe very much in growth learning, that we succeed in imparting climate journalism guidance successfully by taking our time. So spending time on these issues, encouraging effort through the process of the work, and practicing consistently and often in and outside of class. So I'll provide a detailed program of self-study outside of taught sessions. This means that students from my data class, for example, will have a particular favourite data visualisation program that they use. I'm encouraging them to use that program more and more outside of class, so that by the time the module comes to completion, they are advanced in that particular data visualisation suite, or they're advanced in particular dealing with Excel, dealing with Google Sheets. In the same way, with the magazine students, I encourage them to do a lot of market research. So I say to them, go out to other student magazines, see what they're doing, see how they're dealing with climate news feature output, which you can then use to update our coverage. Okay? And we've had success at Kingston in the last 4 years. The students have won 5 Student Publication Association awards, so it does work. You know, what they produce, it does actually work. It's tempting to teach climate reporting from the front, chalk and talk. You know, you think that you can proselytise, you're going to lose the class if you adopt that approach. It won't work. Interaction is essential. If you use the wrong strategy, you're in danger of alienating class members and adding to their climate anxiety. Remember, in a recent global survey of 10,000 young people aged 16 to 25 globally, 3/4 said they thought the future was frightening, with 56% saying they believed humanity was doomed. 60% felt very worried or extremely worried, and around half said feelings about the climate affected their daily lives. So if we are to be a force for good, and to look to improve upon our offering, it's beholden on us to use these inclusive, practical techniques which sensitively deal with this, the issue of our age. And I'll finish just with the bibliography. Thank you very much.